Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Charity Village webinar. We are going to get started in just a moment. We just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to join us before we begin the session. We have people joining us from across the country today, which is excellent. It's so nice to have all of you here. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to today's Charity Village webinar. My name is Mercedes and I'm the Marketing and Communications Specialist with Charity Village. As we are gathering here on a virtual platform, it is important to acknowledge that each of us is joining this webinar from the ancestral or unceded lands of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nation people. As a settler on this land, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Anishinaabe, which includes the Ojibwe of Fort William First Nation. For those who may be joining a Charity Village webinar for the first time, Charity Village is Canada's largest online job board for the nonprofit sector. In addition to our online job board, organizations can also post volunteer positions. So if you are looking for work or to recruit talent in the sector, Charity Village is a great place to start. We also have a ton of excellent resources for nonprofit professionals, including online courses, articles, fundraising tools, and free webinars like the one we are presenting today. Before we start today's webinar, I would like to quickly run through some housekeeping items. You may have noticed when you joined the webinar that you were automatically put on mute. Since we have hundreds of participants in today's session, it is important for us to minimize the amount of background noise so that everyone can clearly hear the presentation. But you can still ask questions and make comments using the question box at the bottom of the Zoom control panel. Look for that at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions as you think of them, and we will do our best to get to as many as possible. You can also email your questions to webinars@charityvillage.com. If you happen to encounter any technical issues with the webinar, whether with viewing the presentation or with the audio, please let us know in the question box or by sending us an email. We will do our best to get any technical difficulties resolved as quickly as possible, but in a worst case scenario, please remember that we are recording today's webinar and we will send you the full recording by email tomorrow. So if you get called away or disconnected, you will still be able to view the full presentation. And with that, I would like to welcome our presenters for today, Christine Kessler and Shirley Wolf from Ankle Back Office Solutions. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. We are happy to be here. I'm going to take this opportunity to allow Shirley to introduce herself first.
Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone on the webinar. It's great to be with you today. So I'm Shirley Wolf. I'm part of the CFO Services Group at Ankle, and I have the privilege of working with a wide variety of not-for-profit organizations. I've spent most of my career in the sector, and I also volunteer on a number of boards, two of which I'm a treasurer, and one of which I'm currently serving as a non-board member on a finance committee. So I'm really looking forward to exploring this topic with you today. And over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Shirley. My name is Christine Kessler. I've been with Ankle for just under 3 years now, and I work in the controllership services in the nonprofit division. I have previously been an executive director of a nonprofit. I have been involved in auditing nonprofits, and I have as well been a treasurer on some boards from my children's school committee to several nonprofits. This is a topic that is very near and dear to Shirley and I, and we are just so excited to be presenting to you today. So let's get started. Ankle was founded in 2016 with a simple problem in mind. You can't build a great organization without good books. So now we've grown to be a company with over 300 clients. We've worked with over 100 NPOs, and we have 80 team members with a global delivery model. Our focus is on financial operations, and we leave things like advisory, tax, and assurance work to your year-end accountants. We would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that our offices at Ankle are situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Our core services at Enkel include bookkeeping, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and controllership, which also includes CFO services. Let's talk about the agenda for today. Shirley and I really enjoy a collaborative webinar. You're going to have opportunities during this webinar to get involved. We're going to be launching several polls, and we ask that you get involved, that you respond to the polls, and we're going to discuss the results together. You're also going to be able to ask questions like Mercedes was saying. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. You're also going to be asked to fill out a survey. You're going to be receiving that through email. One thing that I ask is if you're asking questions during the webinar, that you include your email address. It's really important to us that we answer all of your questions. Shirley and I are going to attempt to answer as many questions as possible here live with you in the webinar. But typically we do get asked a lot of questions and we can't always get to each and every one. So please drop your email address with your question and we'll ensure that you get an answer to your question. All right, let's talk about what we're going to be covering. We're going to be talking about the role and responsibility of the treasurer and the finance committee on your board. We're going to discuss ways that you can empower your treasurer. We're going to provide you with some tips for identifying and recruiting the right person for that treasurer role. And we're going to navigate some pitfalls and ensure compliance with regulatory requirements. I'm going to pass this on to Shirley after this polling question. So we're going to open up our first poll. Let's talk about your treasurer and finance committee right now. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being very low, 5 being very high, how would you rate the current level of engagement and involvement of your treasurer finance committee in your organization's financial decision-making process? So when you're making those big decisions on spending or expansion or all of those things that are really relevant to your nonprofit, how involved does your finance committee and treasurer become? We typically wait till a good portion of our participants participate, and then we discuss the fund. Typically, what I have seen in my background is it really depends often on the size of the agency. And Shirley's going to be talking about this in a little while, about how the size of your agency can also determine the involvement of the treasurer and finance committee. So we'll be interested to see if that also plays into your responses. So the majority of people have responded 4, so between 3 and 4. And I think that's pretty common. There would be some agencies where the board might be a little bit more hands-off. And then we've got 20% saying very high. So that's very promising, isn't it, Shirley?
Yes, absolutely. It's great to see that there's been such a high level of involvement generally of the treasurer and the finance committee in the organization, because the treasurer role is a very important one. But that level of involvement can vary from organization to organization. There's generally more involvement with smaller organizations that have few, if any, employees in finance roles. The treasurer is typically the board member with the most in-depth understanding of the financial condition of the organization and guides the board in its financial decision-making. The role requires a focus on both the present and the future, being alert to risks and opportunities, and ensuring alignment of the financial decisions with the organization's strategy. The treasurer is usually elected or appointed at the AGM together with the other officers. Most boards are recruiting a CPA with relevant experience and knowledge of the not-for-profit sector to fill the treasurer role. Because board members are often very diverse in terms of their skill sets, the treasurer may be the only person with in-depth financial expertise on the board. Some boards establish finance committees and recruit non-board members with financial expertise on the committee. But we'll hold that thought for now because we'll be looking at finance committees a little bit later in the presentation. It's important that the treasurer and the board review the financial statements of the organization regularly, and I would say at least quarterly, to monitor the financial health of the organization and to ensure that decisions are being made on a timely basis, especially if there needs to be a change in course. The treasurer normally presents the financial statements to the board, either monthly or quarterly. I'm aware of an organization that is currently facing some headwinds with a projected net liability at the end of their current fiscal year, and they expect to have insufficient funding to cover the executive director's salary for the entire year. So in this type of circumstance, the treasurer would get very involved, providing guidance to both management and to the board. I'm a treasurer for a charity that prepares a strategic plan every 5 years, and I found it important to understand the financial resources required to implement the plan, and if the organization currently has those resources, or whether they need to raise additional revenues or perhaps purchase assets in the future to realize the plan. I also review the plan to make sure that it's financially feasible. Treasurers are often involved during budget season by reviewing a first draft of the budget, understanding those key assumptions that are used by management when preparing the budget, and ensuring that the budget aligns with the mission and the strategy of the organization. It's generally the board's responsibility to ensure that the board is in compliance with the applicable laws and regulations. Treasurers often focus on requirements such as the filing of tax returns, but shouldn't overlook other areas as there could be adverse financial consequences for the organization. I found it a good practice to make sure that a member of management is monitoring the organization's compliance and regularly reports to the treasurer or to a finance committee or perhaps the board as a whole. Treasurers also play an important role in protecting the organization's assets against threats such as fraudulent activity and cyber attacks that are very prevalent in our world today, and regularly assessing the risks that the organization is exposed to. It's important to understand the organization's key internal controls and any gaps that may exist in those internal controls. The treasurer is also usually the board member that interacts with the auditor if your organization undergoes an annual audit. The auditor is required to communicate their audit plan and the results of the audit to those charged with governance. And the treasurer will normally review these reports as well as the draft financial statements before they are reviewed and approved by the board. Finance committees are often invaluable to a treasurer as their responsibilities can be shared with others who have financial expertise. The committees are usually chaired by the treasurer and comprise other board members or non-board members with financial expertise. Management presents the financial statements, budgets, forecasts, and other materials, and information perhaps such as any significant transactions that are being considered to the committee. I chair a finance committee that also has responsibility for monitoring the organization's investments. And we've had a very busy year with various real estate purchases and the merger of operations of another organization that discontinued their operations. Finance committees don't typically make decisions, but they will make recommendations to the board for approval. So we're now going to open up our next polling question. This question looks at the main challenges that the Treasurer or Finance Committee may face in fulfilling its responsibilities. These may include limited resources, so there may be insufficient staff or budgets, essentially financial resources available to the organization. There could be a lack of expertise or training that's required. Perhaps there are communication and coordination issues between the treasurer and management, or perhaps between finance committee members. Or there could be a resistance to change or new ideas. So I do invite you to respond to this poll. The results are coming in, and it looks like 57% of our respondents have identified limited resources as being a main challenge, and that I can certainly understand, and particularly in today's economic environment. Our second response at 46% is a lack of expertise or training. It's, as I mentioned, it's absolutely essential to make sure that you have the right skill sets on your board as a whole, but as well specifically for the treasurer and the finance committee role. So thank you so much for your responses. And I'm now going to hand over to Christine to take us through the next section of our presentation.
Thanks so much, Shirley. What great participation in today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for being so involved. And I see the Q&A box is lighting up, so we really appreciate your feedback. Let's talk about how to empower your treasurer. Some organizations don't hand out the roles on their board as if it were a job, but we really should. Clearly outlining responsibilities and expectations of the treasurer is paramount in creating a really good relationship between the agency and the board. You should be providing a comprehensive job description and regular updates on the role scope. For example, you may want your treasurer to be an accountant. You may want them to have extensive NPO experience. You may want them to have worked within a charity before, or as an auditor, for example. So really setting those guidelines and those expectations early and communicating ahead of time can really be beneficial. It's important to have a comprehensive onboarding as well. You can offer that through orientation and training. And I find that the more that you make your treasurer part of your finance team, and I know some nonprofits are probably sitting there saying, we have such a small little team, we have limited resources, and we see that happen often. But as long as you can keep that treasurer as part of your finance team and work collaboratively with your team, and you can do that by providing them training on the organization's financial systems like QBO, DEX, and talking to them about your policies and procedures and getting their guidance. You also want to make sure that they are familiar with nonprofit accounting principles and relevant regulations. So having a background in the nonprofit sector is really vital when providing guidance to a nonprofit. Shirley has just talked about some of the more complex things that she's been helping support an agency with. So a sale of real estate and merging with another organization. This requires Shirley's wealth of knowledge, both as partner at firm for many years, and also her vast nonprofit experience. So that board is really, really lucky to have you, Shirley. Now, it's important to empower your treasurer. So they're busy helping you and supporting your organization, but we really want to talk about how we empower the treasurer. So the first thing that you want to do is to provide them with the tools that they need to be able to perform their duties successfully. And that includes, and most importantly, ensuring that they have up-to-date financial data and reports, and that they're timely, that they have enough time to review them and ask questions before they would present them to the finance committee or the board. They still need you to be available to answer those questions, so be prepared for that. You also want to make sure that you make yourself available to the treasurer as needed. And you might want to consider investing in your treasurer as they invest in you. So encourage participation in things like workshops and seminars and courses that are nonprofit specific that really help align your organization to be compliant with regulations and requirements. Those are ever changing. So you really want to have someone that is on top of those changes. You may also want to consider providing opportunities for professional development and even certifications. Your treasurer will need a strong support system. I mean, we all need a strong support system. Specifically for the treasurer, you want to foster collaboration with the finance committee and the board. So, as the executive director, you're that bridge that sort of ensures that there's no gaps between the board, the treasurer, and your team or yourself. So, you really want to foster a robust relationship between you and the treasurer and your financial staff. You can do this with regular communication. You can set up regular meetings, discuss financial matters and updates. You can ask questions and they can ask questions. So you really want to promote open lines of communication for questions and concerns. I think a lot of times when we feel supported, we feel in the loop, right? And so you really want to collaborate with your treasurer and let them feel like they're in the loop. Continuing along with this conversation, let's talk about authority and autonomy. You want to empower your treasurer to make financial decisions, but within the scope of their responsibilities. So we do want to keep them in a governance position, but we do want to make sure that, we've gone to all of that work of choosing that right person for the role. So you have someone that is appropriate, has the appropriate background, and you're doing that because you want to use and glean from their expertise. So trust them. Trust them to guide you with good financial decisions, trust their judgment, and provide them constructive feedback and recognition for their work. It is an extensive job, or it can be. You want to set measurable goals and you want to review their progress regularly, just like any other role within your organization. You also want to ensure that your treasurer is involved with strategic planning of your organization and decision making. Ensure that they have a voice in aligning with your financial goals, your organization goals. Ensure that they're involved in those conversations. You want to ensure that they have access to other expertise. You want to facilitate connections with financial advisors, auditors, and other external experts. You want to encourage consultation with legal and financial professionals as needed as well, and that is often your year-end accountant. I want to open up our next poll. Now that we've talked about how to empower your treasurer, choose your treasurer, we want to talk about your own organization now. Which aspect of financial management do you believe is the most challenging for your organization? This is going to be a really interesting topic because we've run several webinars on these exact topics, haven't we, Shirley?
Absolutely.
Really interested to see. Oh, there it is. I was going to say that one of our most popular webinars was on budgeting forecasting. if you remember, Shirley. It wasn't that long ago, actually. It would definitely be in the Charity Village. I want to call them archives, but Charity Village is so great about making everything available after the fact. So our number one answer is budgeting and forecasting, and that is very, very common. And as you're already dealing with your year end and you're talking about budgeting and forecasting, we see this all of the time. The second most popular answer, Shirley, is internal controls and compliance, and then financial reporting and analysis third. Investment management would be last, and I think that is a pretty typical response that we see. So we're really happy to be able to support you in some of these topics. I'm going to now turn this over to Shirley, who's going to talk about tips for identifying and recruiting the right candidate for the treasurer role.
Well, thank you, Christine. This is, of course, a very, very important next step. But so we're going to have a look then at some of the things that you can be putting in place to make sure that you are selecting the right person for the role. But looking back at the role itself, this is generally clearly defined in the governance policies of the board. And the board may also have a skills matrix that sets out the qualifications and the experience needed for the specific role. And if the board has a finance committee, it's also helpful to identify the skills that the members should collectively have, such as investment experience if you have a portfolio of investments, or industry experience that may be particularly important to your sector, such as real estate if you're in the housing sector, or perhaps if you're operating in the health or education sector. The treasurer also has an important leadership role for the board and management. And so having the skills to appropriately lead the organization, communicate and collaborate with others is also critical. So don't overlook those skills. I've recently heard of an unfortunate situation where a treasurer was asked to resign from a board because of behaviors that weren't aligned with the organization's values. And I can't underscore enough the importance of ensuring that there's alignment with the organization's mission and values, and that the treasurer is also committed and available to fulfill their responsibilities and help the organization succeed. So do make sure that the interview process is thorough and that you do your reference and background checks. So some boards have developed policies that define a process for recruitment of directors, but whether there's a defined process or not, you would want to ensure that you are advertising through appropriate channels and using your networks to find suitable candidates, those that have the right qualifications and experience, but as well as having those important soft skills that we spoke about. There also perhaps are some red flags that you would want to be cognizant of that we've listed on the next slide. So through the interview process, do be alert to any of these red flags that you may see, because the treasurer role needs to have those right skills, values, engagement, and commitment to be successful in the role. So before we get into the topic of navigating pitfalls, we have another polling question for you. So how do you currently measure the effectiveness of your finance committee or treasurer in supporting your organization's financial goals? You may use key performance indicators, perhaps some financial metrics, such as budget variances or particular ratios that are important to your organization. You may obtain feedback from stakeholders, or perhaps you don't currently measure the effectiveness or success of the treasurer or the finance committee. One option actually that we don't have listed up here is is self-assessments by boards, and this is sometimes done annually, and that may include the specific measurement of the effectiveness of committees such as a finance committee as well. Great. So seeing the responses, it looks like the majority don't actually measure the effectiveness or success of their treasurer or their finance committee currently. The next highest grouping is 13%, where financial metrics are being used. So that perhaps isn't a surprise, but it's perhaps something for you to think about in terms of how you may go about measuring the effectiveness of those in the role, and perhaps also for your board as a whole. So thank you again for participating in our poll. So we're looking now then at the topic of navigating pitfalls, and perhaps some of the things that you can be doing to make sure that you don't perhaps fall into a trap. So treasurers and finance committees have an important role in reviewing the financial statements that we spoke about earlier, and also asking questions of management to better understand the finances and any potential issues. In challenging times, I would say these reviews need to be more frequent, and the treasurer may need some additional information from management, such as forecasts, and perhaps some sort of cash projections as well, if you're anticipating running into some cash shortages in the near future. On a finance committee I chair, I encourage the members to have an inquiring mind and to welcome all questions, including those more difficult why questions, and certainly emphasizing that no question is a stupid question. We review the organization's financial policies annually and meet with the auditors to discuss their recommendations on improvements to internal controls. Management prepares annual operating and capital budgets and presents them to the committee, and we do that 1 month ahead of the meeting at which these budgets are presented to the board for their approval. Boards often develop their own higher level financial policies and also ensure that management have developed and documented more detailed process and internal controls that form a roadmap for employees to follow. The board financial policies would cover situations when board approval is needed, such as expenses that may exceed a certain threshold, purchases and sales of any significant assets such as real estate, and also any lending arrangements that the organization would enter into. So the treasurer has an important role in developing these policies and ensuring that they're communicated and accessible to management. A best practice for boards is also to set aside a budget each year for training and education, and to stay up to date on financial management and legal and regulatory matters so that you can in turn be guiding the organization. So I'm now going to hand it back to Christine, who's going to share tips on ensuring regulatory compliance.
Thank you, Shirley. All right, let's talk about understanding your legal obligations. You want to make sure that you are familiar with regional, provincial, and federal laws governing your nonprofit organization. These can change often, so you want to stay informed about changes in regulations and ensure that your agency remains compliant. And that could be from filing your charity return to a different way of recognizing revenue. You want to make sure that you have accurate and timely reporting. You want to prepare and file your required financial reports on time and ensure that they're accurate. You want to ensure transparency and accuracy in financial reporting when you're reporting to the board and regulatory bodies. Are you conducting regular audits? It's important to have an annual audit, either internal or external. to ensure that your financial data has integrity and compliance. You want to address any findings or recommendations from auditors promptly. But to strive to have financials that are in line with where the auditor's recommendations are on an ongoing basis. So it's a good idea to discuss the adjusting journal entries with your finance team and your treasurer to identify why those adjustments were necessary and how you can improve going forward. Maintain proper documentation. Accountants love supporting documentation, and so does CRA. Remember that. Keep detailed and organized records of all financial transactions, policies, procedures. Your auditor will also want to see those. Ensure your records are easily accessible for review and audit purposes. Now we're going to talk about CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. Ensure that you have timely filing of all things that are owed to CRA and payment of any required taxes. And of course, that can include taxes for payroll, taxes like GST that you may have collected. Understand and comply with tax exempt status requirements and related regulations. But we have found, working with so many diverse nonprofits here at Enkel, GST rules, HST rules really are organization specific. We have gotten really great, I think, at just really collaborating with auditors and our teams and our clients to understand the nuances that go into the different GST rules that apply to different organizations. It really is not a one size fits all. So adhering to CRA's requirements can be specific to your organization. So ensure that you know the rules that are adequate for your own organization. You want to ensure ethical standards and integrity. We always strive to uphold the highest ethical standards in all financial dealings. As a nonprofit, the money that is flowing through your organization is entrusted to you. So you want to ensure that you are handling it with high ethics and promote a culture of integrity and accountability within the organization. And when needed, you want to ensure that you engage legal and financial advisors. You want to know what fits within your scope or the treasurer's scope, and when you need to ask for help. So consult with legal and financial professionals to ensure compliance with those more complex regulatory requirements. Seek expert advice on any issues or uncertainties regarding compliance. Your year-end accountant will be vital here to ensure that you have your questions answered when it comes to compliance. All right. We're kind of coming up to the end of the webinar, which is great because we are going to be asking questions. Shirley, would you like to launch this poll?
Yes, absolutely. Great. Well, we wanted to launch this polling question to get your feedback on topics that are of interest to you in future questions. So we've listed a number here for you to consider. But if there are any topics that are you would like us to present on and consider for future sessions, please drop them in the Q&A box and we'll certainly consider those. So topic suggestions that we have here are budgeting and financial planning, financial reporting and analysis, internal controls and compliance, bookkeeping and financial operations, technology, and fundraising and donor management. I look forward to seeing your responses. Great. Wow. Well, it looks like we have a more or less even distribution of those topics. So great. Thank you so much. And we will certainly keep those in mind for as we plan future sessions. So if you're also rethinking your financial operations and considering making some changes, we'd be very happy to share our insights with you on how our services may benefit your organization. So please, again, use the Q&A box to to drop your email and contact details, and we'll reach out to you. We also have a guide called 10 Strategies for Effective Financial Oversight, Management and Reporting that you can download for free from our website, and you're most welcome to do so. And we've left ample time anticipating that you may have many questions for us. And so we look forward to responding to those shortly. And again, I just wanted to give you a reminder just to pop your email address into the Q&A box as well, just in case we don't have the opportunity to get to answer your question. Great.
All right, let's take some questions, Shirley.
Good. So I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. So the first one I'm seeing here is the treasurer role required in organizations? So can you have a board without a treasurer? So I typically do not see boards without the treasurer role, unless for some reason the treasurer has resigned and that role is just not filled on a temporary basis. But I would recommend that you look at the applicable laws and regulations for your organization, also any bylaws that you may have, as well as your board's own policies. But generally, the treasurer is seen as being an officer of the organization, and that role would need to be filled.
I see a question here, Shirley. Why would the treasurer be in charge of the audit? They do not have the daily knowledge of what is happening. This is a great question, and this can vary from agency to agency. The way that I see the role of the treasurer with the audit is some treasurers like to be the main point of contact with the auditor to sort of oversee. In other situations, the main point of contact is the controller of the organization. There are agencies that just don't have a robust finance team. And so the treasurer will get involved with just being a liaison between the team that has a lot of that financial knowledge and the auditor. Is that your experience as well, Shirley?
Yes, but auditors do, as I mentioned in the presentation, have a responsibility to to present the results of their audit and typically also aspects of their audit plan to those charged with governance. So that would be the board, or the board may delegate the responsibility to the finance committee. But typically, the treasurer would be the person that the auditor would have the most contact with when actually delivering those presentations. And it's often the treasurer, just because of their level of financial expertise, that they'll want to review those materials perhaps together with the finance committee and the auditor prior to them being presented to the board for their approval. So the treasurer, yes, although they don't get involved with the details, just from their role as a board member, is quite heavily involved in the process.
Shirley, I see a question here that's been asked a couple of times, so it would be great to address it. And I think it's probably a fairly common question. What happens in a board when the finance person just doesn't have that experience, that nonprofit experience, or even financial experience, and the agency is feeling like they're making bad decisions or giving bad guidance? How do they manage that?
Yes. Well, that's an interesting situation. So what in that, and I don't know in this particular situation whether there is a finance committee in place or not. If there's not, I would suggest having a finance committee in place and then recruiting members onto that committee. And again, it would need to be a decision of the board, because sometimes you're reaching out to non-board members to be members of the committee. I'm finding that's quite commonplace. The other option that you may have is also just to recruit additional board members as well, if you don't wish to have board members on the committee. So making sure that you do have people with the necessary financial expertise and that also have sector experience as well.
Hey. Now, this is a great question as well. This agency has a new treasurer who has accounting experience, but not specific nonprofit accounting experience. And the question is, where could they get some of that knowledge? So there are
Mhm.
courses that you can take, and you might even consider sending your treasurer to a course. There's a lot of resources online.
Mhm.
There is obviously something that comes with, there's a depth of knowledge that comes with working with nonprofits, but Shirley started somewhere, I started somewhere, and it came from years of experience. So they need to start somewhere. So I would suggest some courses, some online resources. Shirley, do you have any other, and
Mhm.
maybe actually having a mentor of another treasurer to align with that is more versed in the nonprofit sector? But would love to hear your thoughts, Shirley.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great idea. But I could also just specifically refer you to the various CPA institutes. So there's an institute in each of the provinces in Canada. Some of the material is only available to members, but there may be material that is available to non-members as well. And then CPA Canada, which is the federal organization, also has material available. But I would definitely seek out those opportunities to, as Christine said, attain some courses just to build that base of technical knowledge.
I also see another great question here that I think echoes a lot of people's thoughts and questions. I see it raised at least a couple of times. And so they're talking about their smaller NPO, they've got a small team, so their treasurer may be more operationally involved. But aside from the job description, what's the best way to ensure a clear delineation between board and management to ensure that the board remains in the governance role? And really those
Mhm.
lines can get gray very quickly. And then
Mhm.
it typically gets quite gray, and then you feel like you need to pull back. So my best advice, and obviously this, your treasurer is already in that role, but creating policies and really strong roles and responsibilities, and aligning with the board and the treasurer ahead of time is always the best course of action. Once that person is already in that role, I think you can still collaborate to come up with a plan where those boundaries and lines need to remain. Surely, with the boards that you're on, is it really clear to you where those lines are, where you can get involved and where really you need to take a step back?
Mhm. Yes, I would say currently it is very clear for me. I'm mostly working on governance boards versus those sort of operational type boards, where board members tend to get a little bit more involved in on the operational side of the business. So yes, I would definitely say to as Christine said, have those roles very carefully uh, described so it's very clear to everybody, but also take those opportunities to set expectations. But sometimes there may be unusual situations that arise, perhaps aspects of the business that are not routine, where you may need to be a sounding board for perhaps your director of finance or your executive director. So realize that you can also help by being there as that sounding board as well.
There was a comment here that we should have added as a poll option that, what happens when people are just struggling to hire a treasurer? No one
Mhm.
wants to do it. And certainly any of us who have taken this role on a board, it is something that you really want to invest in like a job. And so it is important that it is a mutual fit. The suggestion that I would give here is to advertise for the role as if it were a paid position within your organization. So if I'm looking to sit on a board, I'm going to pull up Charity Village often and see the ads there, or collaborate with different organizations in my community that are near and dear to my heart. But I think I think that's a really good strategy in trying to find someone. And I'm not saying that that's the absolute answer, but is the word out? Do people know that you're trying to hire a treasurer? A lot of times people are really relying on word of mouth. And if you can really embrace it as position within your organization and advertise in the same way, you may attract people as well. You may want to be flexible, allow your treasurer to possibly join remotely. You may be able to attract people from outside of your catchment area. Shirley, do you have any other suggestions that might help in recruiting a treasurer when it's been really difficult and challenging for some organizations?
Yes, perhaps another suggestion as well is also to contact those CPA institutes, because they also have job boards for, of course, regular jobs, but also just for boards where you may need to be filling that treasurer role. I've also, but very unusual circumstances, actually seen recruiters being engaged to help find appropriate people on board. So that is also perhaps an avenue that you can consider.
All right. So the question here is, the term treasurer and chair of the finance committee are both used, but is a treasurer role more hands-on and not just governance? I'm gonna leave Shirley to answer this one.
I would say no. I think typically a treasurer should be in that governance role. But by virtue of their leadership on the finance committee, they would generally be more involved than the committee as the other committee members would be. In a similar way to the chair of the board being more involved, perhaps in various aspects of the organization than the rest of the board members would be. So, for example, as a treasurer, you may choose to be meeting with the executive director and director of finance periodically as well, just to sort of create that opportunity again for communication and just have some insights into what they're thinking about and what may be coming down the pipeline as well. But you really are still doing that in the capacity as a board member, so a governance role.
Thank you, Shirley. We're coming up to about just a few minutes before we close here. So there's another question here. Can you share some examples? This is a good question, of internal controls that can be implemented to prevent fraud and errors if the treasurer does not have a close relationship with the finance staff. I think a lot of these internal controls would apply to the entire board as well. Shirley?
Yes. So examples of internal controls, around fraud is of course the committee or the treasurer would want to make sure that there's proper authorization for all payments that the organization has made. So typically, the board would approve the various signatories, and those would really reside with the bank as well. So if you're issuing checks, that policy would define who can sign the checks, what sort of supporting documentation may need to be reviewed at the time of signing those checks. If EFTs are made, well, who has the authority to approve those? And some organizations use payment tools such as Pluto, which include those tiers and specific people who are authorized to approve. And then, of course, there may be payments that are being made by an organization where if they're over a certain threshold, and that could be quite a significant amount depending on the organization, perhaps it's more than $10,000, but maybe it's also more than $50,000, where board approval would be required before that transaction can go ahead. So those are some examples of internal controls that the board would be looking at. As I say, the more detailed processes are often something that management will put in place. So when I mention management, that would be your director of finance or your executive director. So it wouldn't perhaps be necessary for boards or treasurers to be looking at all of the detailed processes and controls, but certainly those that are very key to the organization. I also mentioned cybersecurity risks in the presentation. So really, so many boards are asking questions around that these days. and making sure that there are the appropriate information technology controls in place so that the organization can be protecting itself against those threats.
All right, this is going to be the last question that we discuss. And again, I just want to remind everyone that if you've left your email address with your question, we will be responding to all of your questions. You're going to get a package with the Q&A from Charity Village. This question was asked a couple of times by the same person, Shirley. So I think it would be great to address it following with their earlier question. They don't have a treasurer. So the current board members are dealing with budgeting, financial matters. What are our thoughts on outsourcing to pay for these services in the meantime? I think this is a fantastic idea. I think, again, it's really important to create those boundaries between your financial team and the board. And so outsourcing to pay to have CFO or controllership services can be really instrumental for a lot of agencies ongoing, but even for short-term projects. And Shirley actually is quite involved with this on a daily basis. This is part of the services she provides. So Shirley, would you provide any other recommendations to this company or this agency?
Absolutely. I think the agency perhaps needs to identify sort of where that gap is, and if you need to go outside your organization. And certainly whoever you may be contracting with can work closely with you, with the director of finance, and then also with the board to make sure that the information that's being presented to the board for their approval is understandable, that they're clear to be able to answer their questions and make sure they're comfortable when it comes to approving the budget.
Great.
Thank you for presenting such an informative webinar. Do you happen to have any final comments before we sign off today?
I wanted to thank Shirley for co-hosting with me and for Charity Village for always providing such a great collaborative experience, and to everyone who attended. We had over 1,000 people register. We had a very large amount of people here, and thank you so much for your participation in the polls and for asking great questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Christine and Shirley. I just wanted to remind everyone that you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the webinar recording. Please feel free to share this link with your colleagues. The email will also include a survey link that you can fill out with your feedback on today's webinar. You should see a survey link pop up right here in Zoom following the session as well. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you'll join us for our next free webinar, Board Revolution, Rethinking Nonprofit Governance for Organizational Impact. You can find more information on this and all of our upcoming webinars at charityvillage.com/webinars. Thanks again for joining us. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.